Hello and happy Wednesday. Welcome to another of the weekly What Makes Your Favorite Church Music Tick shows here in the Latter day Musiversity Facebook group. Glad you're here. By request, this week we're going to look at the primary song, He Sent His Son. This is a great favorite, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and so we're gonna pick it apart, see how it was put together, so that you can learn some tricks of the trade to write your next primary song. All right, let's take a 30,000 foot view look at this to begin with. We always like to think about the structure and the key and see if we can pick out the form of the song, which really helps when you're writing because it gives you a shell or a skeleton to really drape your music around so that it has a good symmetrical feel and inevitability about it. So, okay, our little 30,000 foot view here. We're in the key of F major, we have one flat, F major. And let's look at the structure of it. So we have a little intro here that ends at 4 bars. So let's just keep track. We have intro, 4 measures. Then the tune proper starts. We have a 4-bar phrase. And another 4-bar phrase which pauses on the 5 chord. So this is like a halfway point here. So the verse, we had 8 bars, and then we had a little half cadence. Remember, a half cadence is when you pause on the 5 chord as sort of the comma of your phrase. Then it continues again, and look, it starts. The tune here starts the same way the tune here started, which is what we call a parallel period. A period being a large phrase split into half. So this is looking like a 16-bar phrase where this verse is first 8 measures, pausing with the half cadence here, and then another 8 measures, which starts the same. How could the Father show the pathway we should go? He sent his Son to walk with men on earth that we may know. Okay, that the phrase ends and it arrives on the 1 chord, which is an authentic cadence, meaning sort of the finish of the phrase, the period at the end of the sentence. And that was another 8 bars. Okay, so our verse is 8 with a half cadence plus 8 more bars ending with an authentic cadence. So 16-bar verse. Then we get very similar material, right? Look at the tune. If you look at the tune here and compare it to the tune here, with the intervals, sounds like the same tune, right? It's just up a fifth. Up a fourth. Yeah, to B flat major. Now let's see how long that tracks. After this first 16-bar phrase, we are kind of asking ourselves, okay, are we doing another verse, or are we into maybe a chorus? Or in some songs, we have an additional kind of transition phase, which we would call a bridge. So we're still not sure. We gotta put on our thinking cap and track what's going on here. So starting right here. What could the Father tell the world of sacrifice of death? There's another little 4-bar grouping. So we're going to expect another 4-bar grouping. He sent his Son to die for us and rise with living breath. And that's the end of that next 8 bars. Then there's a little bit of it sort of blossoms to a bit of a climax. So it's almost like a phrase extension to allow the energy of this middle section sort of reach its apex, which it does on this lovely big rolled chord. And then it starts over. What does the Father ask of us? What do the scriptures say? Have faith, have hope, live like his son. Okay, so we had the 4 bars. We had the 1, 2, 3, 4. And then another 1, 2 with the fermata, 3, 4, which ends here. So an 8-bar phrase. And then this little kind of coda thing. What does he ask? Live like his son. So these last, let's see, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bars. We could call that a coda, the ending, because sort of the tag at the end. This is basically another verse, but it's really only half of a verse, right? We don't get the full 16 bars. And this middle section, now that we're kind of backtracking, it's pretty harmonically different than the other ones. So you could technically call it a bridge, I suppose. But it's really 9 bars, this 8 bars plus this extra bar that feeds back into this 8 bars. So we have another, we have a 9-bar phrase, which is, it's really 8 plus 1 because the piano climax, and then we have that last 8 bars, and then we have a final, it's 4 plus 1 bars. It's really 4 bars with a long note at the end, so 5 bars just for modest sake. So a couple ways you could look at this structurally. Structurally, and it doesn't really matter what we call things. It's just kind of interesting to see the symmetry of it. The piece is basically a 4-bar intro, 2 16-bar verse-like sections, and then a 4-bar coda, which is really, this is really 17 bars because we have that extra measure, and this is really 5 bars because we have that extra measure. But this 16-bar phrase and this 16-bar phrase, they're broken up into 2 halves, right? Into 2 8 parts. So you could call it 2 verses, but each verse has 2 groups that are kind of, it's almost like it's A, B, let's see if it's A again, or if no, this would be C, which then goes back to, I lost my spot. Oh, there we are. This would be C, and this would be B, right? Does that track? Let's see if that tracks. Does this piece track with the opening or with the second 8-bar phrase? That's the second of the 8-bar phrases, right? Right here. Yeah, close enough. So it's really the 2 16-bar phrases. The first one would be like A, B, and the second one would be like C, B, which is nice. It feels like symmetrically 2 full verses. And because of the way the composer, I'm not even sure who wrote this, music by, Michael Moody. Well, there you go. Great composer, Michael Moody, who wrote This Is the Christ and lots of other things, and he was in charge of the hymn book committee for the 85 book. The way he very tactfully uses the same material to start each of these phrases, and then sort of a reverse of it here. And where's the next one? Here, and then the last one. They're all super similar, so it's almost like, with all this similar material, which direction can I go? How can I play with their expectations? So you could look at it as 2 16-bar phrases, or you could look at it as like a verse in 16 bars with a bridge of 8 bars and a half verse of 8 bars followed by a coda. So, we could argue about which one's correct, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is that we noticed it and that we can see the cadences. All right, so let's zoom in a little with the cadences. This one, pausing on the 5, makes us feel like we're halfway through a phrase. It's a comma. This one, pausing on the 1, makes us feel like it's finished. Okay. Then we jump to B flat major. We jump to the 4 chord, and we're like, where's this going to go? The cadence, it does have a bit of a cadence right here, but it's pausing on an A7 chord, which is not in this key. And then the next cadence is really here, which is another pause on the 5 with this extension here. Then we're back to the 1 chord, which has a little pause here, but it's not a cadence. It's preparing us for this cadence, which is another authentic cadence. And this one here is not a full cadence because it's only after 4 bars. It's like the equivalent of up here where we go 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the equivalent of this spot right here, which is not a full cadence point if we're looking at the big 8-bar phrase. Again, you could analyze this different ways. You could analyze it in 4-bar chunks. You could analyze it in 8-bar chunks. Not really necessary to get crazy about what to call everything, but it's nice to see how symmetrical those phrases are. So if you laid out this phrase next to this phrase, they line up, but the harmony in this one takes you to a different place, which is so nice. Okay. Okay, so that's sort of our bird's eye view. It's almost a, it's almost a palindrome, not really, but the way we have bookends, we have the opening 4 bars, and we have the closing 4 bars plus the little fermata bar, and with the 2 16-bar phrases in the middle, it's very symmetrical. Is the point I'm trying to make. All right, that's one way. One level of how to look at the piece with the structure. Now let's get a little bit more detailed with some harmony. Okay, erase all my chicken scratch. Now, I don't know about you, but when I'm looking at the structure, that really helps me as a composer, because for me, I get a musical idea, or I have a bit of text that I want to set, or I have a scripture that I want to set, and I'll come up with a little melodic idea, a little kernel of a melody, because of the text or whatever it may be. And so that's usually where I start is, okay, well, I need to have a little bit of a tune that has legs. So I often start there. But pretty quickly after I get a bit of an idea of what the tune is going to be like, I got to fit it to some kind of structure. So every tune is a little bit different, but often you're looking for 4-bar phrases or 8-bar phrases or 16-bar phrases. Keeping a melody going for longer than 16 bars is pretty tough, unless you're at a super fast tempo and you're going for 32 bars, because 32 bars can feel like 16 bars if the tempo's fast enough. But the point is, typically for this kind of music, you want to encase your melodic ideas in a very symmetrical, divisible by 4 bars structure. Okay? It doesn't always happen that way. There are certainly pieces that don't do that, but the reason why it's so common is because it doesn't make the listener confused. Right? A confused listener doesn't pay attention, and they want to keep listening. It does not invite them in. So playing with those expectations of what your audience does accept and doesn't accept as easy listening or enjoyable listening is part of the fun of being a composer. But maybe save your phrase length stuff for other arenas of music, not necessarily sacrament meeting. because we want it to be with one listen. That's the challenge. They're not going to sit there and listen a couple of times. You have to, in one listen, convince them. So giving them a parameter that's friendly is really helpful. So structure is important. Okay, sorry, that was a long little thing about structure. Okay, now harmony. So we are in F major, as I mentioned before, and we have this rhythmic mantra in three of the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's a nice kind of gentle. There's regularity. It's going somewhere, and yet it's not overwhelming. It's calm. It's a nice rhythmic, welcoming mantra. Okay, we start with the 1 chord. The guitar chord says that it's a C7. It's not really a C7. I mean, it's close. It's really like a 1 sus, where the third went to a 4th. So it's like a suspended 1 chord, and then back to a 1 chord, and then another 1 sus, and then it has a little bit of a tune. Just to give it a little bit of lyricism. Okay, then we get to the piece proper after the intro. We get our 1 chord again. Then we get a G minor chord. Well, sort of. I mean, yeah. Okay. So here's what's happening. We're working really hard to keep the music simple for the primary pianist. That we're not always getting fully fledged complete chords. So it's kind of ambiguous. You could continue to call this a 1 sus, because the left hand is basically doing the 1 chord with the B and the B flat instead of the A. They called the guitar chord G minor because, technically if you put the G together with that, it does make a G minor chord, but it's in third inversion with the 7th and the bass. It's more of a pedal tone F with a little bit of, 1 chord going to its neighbor with the B flat coming back. This one kind of stays on the sus, but because the melody surrounds a C major triad, that is more of a 5/7 chord, but the F and the bass would be what we call a non-chord tone, where it doesn't fit the chord. There's a bunch of types of these, and this one would be a pedal tone, meaning that this pedal note has stayed the same throughout. Okay, then we come back to the 1 chord, and now the suspension. There's actually 2 suspensions here. Suspension is another type of non-chord tone, like a pedal tone, but it's prepared by the same note. See how this B flat happens before? Then here it does not belong to the chord, and then as it resolves, it does belong to the chord. That's what a suspension is. It's a preparation, the suspension itself where it's a dissonance, and then the resolution thereof when it steps down. And so we have another suspension here. The G is a non-chord tone, and it resolves to a chord tone here. And then the next step we take with non-chord tones is we give them numbers. We look above the bass. So this B flat is a 4th above the bass, so we call this a 4/3 suspension, because the 4th, the dissonance, resolves to the 3rd above the F, which is a consonant tone. This G is a 9th above the bass note, which is a dissonance, but it resolves to an octave above the bass note, which is an 8, so we call it a 9/8 suspension. So we have simultaneous 9/8 and 4/3 suspensions, which is not too uncommon. It's pretty common. But then right here, we are stepping down. This one is also a non-chord tone, but it's what we call a passing tone. This is really common, where the bass note steps down, it's making its way to that note. Okay, so here we definitely have a 6 chord, D minor chord, which is a cousin of the 1 chord, right? The 1 chord is F, A, C. The 6 chord is D, F, A, and they share 2 of their 3 notes. So to start a phrase with a 6 chord as a contrast to starting a phrase with a 1 chord is pretty typical. It's very common because of this close cousin relationship. Okay, but he also keeps the same shape of the melody, right? Da, 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 dee, 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 da. It's very melodically. What's the word? It's not cohesive. Well, I guess it is cohesive, but there's a super strong melodic identity in every one of these phrases because the integrity. There's a lot of melodic integrity with this opening motive. It just happens again and again, and it changes a little bit, and it gets varied. It gets raised up by a third or taken down a fourth, or sometimes it's a little bit upside down, or the rhythm changes slightly, but this motive is a lot of motivic integrity throughout the piece. Okay, let's keep going with harmony. So now we're in this second 4 bars of the first half phrase with the 4 chord. Now down here with our B natural, ooh, that doesn't belong, right? So anytime we see a chromatic note like that while we're doing analysis, we stop and we say, B natural, that doesn't belong. What's it doing there? And if it's a raised note, which this is because it was B flat, now we've raised it to B natural, typically, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, it's a new leading tone. In other words, in F major, we have our leading tone is E. Leading tone, tonic. But the B natural, it's a new leading tone. We've raised the B flat to the B natural, which wants to resolve to the C, like a leading tone to C. Okay, and we call it a secondary leading tone because it's not in the primary key. It's in a secondary tonal area. Okay, and then we ask ourselves, okay, well, where is it leading? If B natural is a leading tone, what's it the leading tone to? You say, well, it's a leading tone to the note that's a half step above it, which in this case is, oops, not that one, is the C right here. This B natural is leading to the C. So it's a secondary leading tone to the note C and the chord C, which makes this entire chord a secondary chord. Okay, so it's a little bit chromatic here. We're getting maybe ahead of some of the learning you've done, but it's totally okay. It's not too difficult to get this. There's a I think I have to double check. I think I put a lesson in the Musiversity app in the Intro to Harmony section about 505. If not, we're talking about the 505 this month in the Muse Evangelist Club. You're welcome to join us there and learn all about it. Okay, so this chord, again, we got to analyze this chord. Because the bass note down here, so far each of these measures has 1 chord for the whole measure. That's another part of this mantra. You can have rhythmic mantras, which we do. We have these chords of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But you can also have harmonic mantras, like the mantra of the harmonic rhythm. In other words, how often does the chord change? So far, the chord changes once per measure. Okay, so when we get down here, if we calculate the entire measure, we get G, B natural, D, and F, with the opening note in the melody as a non-chord tone. We'll talk about that in a second, but first let's analyze the chord. So G, B natural, D, F, that looks like a minor 2 chord. but because of the B natural, it's not minor. So we don't call it a minor. We call it a secondary dominant because it is the dominant 7, the 5-7 of C. So 5-7 of 5. Because if you were in the key of C, what is the 5 chord in the key of C? Well, it's G, B, D, F. And that's what we have. We have G, B, D, F, but it's out of place because of the B natural. In other words, it's not a primary chord in the primary key. It's a secondary chord from a secondary key, in this case, the key of C major. And the relationship between C major and F major that we're in is a really strong one. F major is the 1 chord and C major is the 5 chord. And this is the tonic dominant divide, the polarity of all sort of Western traditional harmony is the polarity, the gravitational pull between the 1 chord and the 5 chord. So all this chord is doing right here is making the arrival of the 5 chord, which we finally get over here, more powerful. That's its job. The job to pause on the 5 chord at a half cadence, like we looked at before, we want that to be inevitable. We want it to be powerful. We want it to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. There's nothing taking me anywhere else. So we want it to be this. It's leading to the C7 super strongly. So by giving the leading tone to the C7 here, it makes it all the more inevitable. Okay. All right, 505. Then we go to, typically the 505 would go directly to the 5, but it makes a little pit stop at the 164, which is a 1 chord in second inversion. So it's still F, A, C, but the C is in the bass. Okay, so second inversion. And 164 is most often used as a preparatory chord to the 5 chord. There are other uses, but it's very commonly used as the precursor to the 5. So to have 5 of 5, which is preparing us to arrive at the 5, go to the common precursor of the 5, and then to the 5, while it may be a little bit confusing because of the secondary stuff, this is a very common chord progression. Usually we see it as minor 2 to 5 to 1. All we've basically done is made it a major 2 chord going to a 5 chord, going to a 1 chord. But we call the major 2 chord a 5 of 5 because it's acting as a dominant of the 5. Okay. And oh goodness, we've hit our half-hour mark. I like to keep these 30 minutes. And so we did some good work here. We looked at the structure of the piece, and we did the harmony for this opening intro and 8 bars. And why don't we pick up the rest of the harmony next week? So don't miss that. That'll be fun. There's some really cool little tricks. We slip to B flat. Whoops, that's not the one. This phrase, when we go kind of into the land of the 4 chord, we're kind of exploring. We have a pause on another chord that's totally out of the key. We have that same chord again. We have another chord totally out of the key here. What's going on? What makes this climax so nice? And then how are they going to finish it off? There's a couple dramatic moments. There's a pause here. It's part of the drama. And then there's one more chromatic chord right here that's different than the chromatic chord we had at the top. And we'll get into that next week. Okay? Thanks for joining me. Please feel free to tell your friends. Each Wednesday at 12 o'clock noon Mountain Time, we'll be here for the What Makes Your Favorite Church Music Tick. And very happy to get requests. He sent his son was a request. It doesn't just have to be primary songs or hymns either. We can look at, hymn arrangements that people play and sing around, or other pieces. Happy to help you with whatever piece you're like. I've always wondered, how does why does this sound this way? Why does that? Send it over and we'll have a look. I'll see if I can help. All right. If you'd like to get access to some other free content, you can head over to ldmusiversity.com where you can get access to my free app with some free lessons in there about a bunch of different things, including harmony. And if you'd like to sign up for one of our workshops, you can do that too. Just keep your eyes peeled for emails about that, or write some comments in and ask about how you can do that, and I'll be happy to help. All right, have a great day, and we'll see you again next time.